Hello, everybody. Passenger ships, warships, clippers, freighters, ancient vessels, the first submarine built for combat. All very different and unique ships, sometimes separated by centuries, but united by one fact. They all disappeared at sea. Today, we are going to be covering the stories of more than 10 very obscure ships that either vanished completely or became lost through known means, but have never been found again. One of these even lies somewhere very close to the wreck of the RMS Titanic. Our 10 stories today will be a collection spanning from the 20th century all the way back to the 12th century. All stories in this video are very obscure ones you've probably never heard before. This is Ships That Disappeared at Sea, Volume 5. Like and subscribe if you enjoy content like this and you want to see more of it. It really helps me grow and lets me know that you want to see more videos like it. Spino, really? You're kind of stealing my thunder here. Built in 1850, the Sea Serpent, I love that name, was an extreme clipper. She was 215 feet long and had a beam of 39 feet. This three-masted vessel was one of the longest-lived extreme clippers, serving 36 years and 9 months before encountering her mysterious fate. Her career was an eventful one. She raced the large merchant vessel Staghound and John Bertman from New York to San Francisco in 1851. The Staghound ultimately won this race by completing the journey in an impressive 107 days. The Sea Serpent came in after 125 due to a layover en route for repairs that cost her 8 days. Sea Serpent was originally built by the United States, but in 1874 she was sold to Normandy. Once she was under her new owner, she was renamed to the Progress. She kept this name until 1891, when she would go missing. On June 12, 1891, while on a voyage from Dublin to Quebec with a cargo of timber, she was suddenly abandoned at sea by her crew, and the rough coordinates of this occurred at 46 degrees north, 40 degrees west. Why her 17 crew members abandoned her, I don't know, but they left the ship for the lifeboats and were picked up by another vessel shortly afterward. For a while, the state of the ship was unknown until October 18th, 1891, when she was sighted by another vessel at 45 degrees north, 24 degrees west, 1,120 miles from where she had been abandoned, making that epic trek in just 93 days. After being abandoned, the empty ship was spotted drifting 19 times before utterly disappearing, and to this day she has never been seen again. Where she went down is unknown, as is the location and state of her wreck. What fate ultimately befell the Sea Serpent is unknown, and she will likely remain missing forever, unless, as I mentioned in past videos in this series, her wreck is happened upon by chance. But until then, the Sea Serpent was reclaimed by the sea. Tell me, where do you think the Sea Serpent could have ended up, or what caused her to sink? Bad weather? Striking something? Disrepair? Maybe she was even captured by someone. I'd love to hear your theories on what happened to her. When people think of romance and sea, most probably think of Titanic in the 1997 movie, and not the ship literally called Romance of the Sea. Like the last one, she was a clipper, the last extreme clipper built by the California Trade, that was launched in 1853. Also, coincidentally, a century before an earlier movie about the Titanic would be made. The Romance of the Sea was 240 feet long, and she had a beam of 36 feet. She weighed 1,780 gross registered tons, and on her bow was a figurehead described as, quote, a small female figure, intended to represent romance, with the name of Sir Walter Scott on one side and James Fenimore Cooper on the other, the greatest romances of the century, end quote. Her career lasted 9 years, but she lost that figurehead after 3 when she encountered a storm. She made 6 round trips from various North Atlantic ports and many more around the world. Some of the places she visited included Boston, San Francisco, New York, Shanghai, the Dutch East Indies, Liverpool, Hong Kong, and it was that last one where she was en route when she vanished and was never heard from again. The cause for the loss is completely unknown, but Somewhere on her 7th voyage, the Romance of the Sea was lost, and to this day her wreck has never been found. All hands were lost with her, and they all utterly vanished. What the story of her final voyage was is a mystery lost to time. This was long before wireless technology was even a thing on ships. Who knows if everyone went down with the ship, or if they drifted for weeks out in the ocean before dying. You never know. None of us will. The ocean swallowed all of those stories up and holds the answers close, and as time passes, the answers only become all the more far away and mysterious. Perhaps she encountered bad weather or wrecked on an island somewhere. We can only guess. The Gertrude. A very quick story with almost no information about it, but one that I thought I'd share since that's what this series is all about. I happened upon this one while researching for the last video, the unidentified shipwrecks of Australia, and I decided to share it. The Gertrude was a coastal cargo ship of British nationality. She was a steamship launched in 1873 that weighed 212 gross registered tons. Her crew was 17 individuals. In 1912, the Gertrude left Hull for Weymouth, carrying a cargo of coal within her, and she disappeared. We now know that the cause for her disappearance was that she ran aground and all 17 crew members were lost with her when she became stranded on Race Bank. Other than that, there isn't much information about her that is easy to dig up. So, let's move on to the next ship. This is one that we will have a little bit more to say about. If you've watched the Unidentified Shipwrecks of Australia video, you'll recognize this one. In that video, I theorized that one of the unidentified wrecks could be of this ship, but I didn't talk much about the ship itself, so let's actually do that. This is the story of the Douglas Mawson. The Douglas Mawson was a coastal steamer from Australia. This wooden-hulled vessel was built in 1914 and could achieve a speed of 8 knots, or 9.2 miles per hour. She was 141 feet long, or 42 meters, and one of the first duties she was assigned was weekly trips under her captain, Captain Donovan, to Nambucca Heads. She was well suited for the area due to her light draught, and she could better navigate the Nambucca River bar than other ships could. In 1916, now under another captain, she was used to carry cement from Geelong to Tasmania. She was later taken over by John Birken's son for the Gulf trade operations, and some thought that she was a poor choice of vessel for the job. And perhaps their fears proved right. That backstory brings us up to March 28, 1923, the day that she was last sighted. Earlier, the SS Douglas Mawson had left Burketown for Thursday Island with 20 people on board, 13 crew and 7 passengers. The only passengers on this voyage were a single family, Mr. and Mrs. Williott and their 5 children. On this voyage, she was under the command of Captain George Finch Toone. The ship left, but she never arrived. Somewhere along the way, she vanished. It's theorized that she might have been menaced by a cyclonic storm somewhere in the Gulf of Carpentaria. She was last sighted by the Aborigines from a beach on March 28th. In May, some wreckage was found, but it has since been proven to not have come from the Mawson. What happened to the ship is unknown, and so is the fate of everyone who was on board her. And as you'll know from the unidentified shipwreck video, I think that her wreck might actually be at Goods Island. We know that the ship was last seen in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and that island that the wreck is on is just northeast of there, at the tip of the Cape York Peninsula. An unidentified wooden shipwreck is there, just off the island, and in my research for that video, this is the only known ship that really matches the wreck's description, and it's in the right area too, so who knows? The Douglas Mawson might actually be found, but until that wreck is studied in detail, we'll just have to still list her as missing, and the location of her wreck as being unknown. If it is her, how she would have ended up there is completely unknown, given that her last reported sighting was much further south. It would be interesting to see where she really is, and if she is indeed at Goods Islands, or somewhere else. I'd just like to see her found. Also, the debris that was found, which turned out not to be from the Mawson, were located on Prince of Wales Island, which is coincidentally very close to Goods Island. So if the ship there isn't the Mawson, maybe these debris came from it? There is a whole lot of unanswered questions with this one. So, let's cover one that's not so mysterious. The MV Blythe Star was a 144-foot-long vessel who disappeared near Tasmania in October 1973. She was on her way from Hobart to King Island, carrying a cargo of beer and fertilizer, so all the party supplies, when she suddenly capsized and sank. After 7 days of searching with no traces of the ship being found, her crew were presumed dead, but as it turned out, they all escaped on emergency inflatable life rafts and survived. 3 of the 10 crew members died, but the others were found 12 days after the sinking, having made their way to a shoreline in Tasmania and finding people who could help them. After this, for nearly 50 years, the wreck of the ship was missing. No one knew where she ended up after going down. The fate of the ship itself was known, but the location of her was not. This year, in 2023, researchers from the CSIRO and the University of Tasmania set out on a 38-day voyage on board a vessel called the RV Investigator to study an underwater landslide. But after that, they turned their attention to something else. An unidentified shipwreck had been reported by fishing vessels in the region. The shipwreck turned out to be the MV Blythe Star. She was finally found after being missing for almost 50 years. Lying under 492 feet of water, she is intact and resting upright on the ocean floor, resting about 7 miles east of the Southwest Cape in Tasmania. The ship itself is in decent condition, but she has suffered from some damage. For instance, her wheelhouse is completely gone. With the location and identity of the wreck determined, government officials and researchers hope to find out just why she abruptly capsized and sank all those years ago. She was found, her location is now known, and she is no longer missing. Unfortunately, this next ship doesn't have such a storybook ending. Very few of the ships we've ever covered in this series do. Like the Blythe Star, the reason that this next one sank is known, but what is not known is the location of her wreck. The Hoop was a ship built way back in 1597. Well, look at that, another Titanic connection. 400 years to the year before the 1997 movie. Fine, Spino. You know, I should have called you the Let's Have No Funosaurus. The Hoop was in service from 1597 until her loss in the Pacific Ocean in 1605. She was built for the United East Indian Company and served as a frigate. She left with a fleet that, after a series of misadventures, ended up just down to 2 ships, the Hoop being one of them. Both were en route to Japan, and the Dutch were actually one of the few outside countries allowed to bring goods and trade into Japan during their long isolation in the Edo period. There was one little island that they could dock their ships on without actually going onto the mainland. After they arrived in Japan, the 2 ships then made to carry on for Hawaii on September 24th. Now, I'm going to be clear about one thing. I'm finding 2 different dates here for her loss, either 1600 or 1605. I'm going to be assuming that it's 1605. That seems to be the more common one, but it also could have been in 1600. I just want to clear that up and cover my bases. The years don't remain consistent between accounts, but the year also doesn't really matter because the end result is the same. En route to Hawaii, the 2 ships became caught in a severe storm. In this storm, the Hoop was lost and all 130 hands went down with her. The other ship survived the storm and limped away, afloat but badly damaged. The cause for the loss of the Hoop is known, but where exactly the ship went down is unknown. The ship disappeared in the storm and was never seen again. The other ship that she was with was lost in 1605, which might be where the conflicting date for the Hoop actually comes from. But no matter the date, the Hoop disappeared in that storm, and she took all of her crew with her. Where her wreck is, or what state it's in, if it even still exists, is unknown and will likely remain unknown. The most ancient one of the ships we're covering today is the White Ship, a vessel which sank and has never been found officially anyway, since November 1120. Yeah, we're going back almost 1,000 years for this one. The White Ship was a notable vessel, as it was tasked with transporting many nobles of the ancient world. And I don't know if it was tasked with this on this one occasion that it went missing, we'll get to that, or if it was a ship designated for specifically transporting the ancient elite. Either way, she would sink on the 25th of November 1120, and this is the story of her loss. The vessel was newly refitted and captained by Thomas Fitz-Stephen. The fact that the ill-fated ship was refitted makes it sound more like a charter vessel than one specifically used by nobles, in my opinion, but I suppose her job could have just been used to transport the higher class around in general. Captain Fitz-Stephen offered King Henry I of England the use of his ship on the return to England from a visit to Normandy. Henry himself had made other arrangements. A good choice in hindsight. History might have been a little bit different if he was also on the ship. Enjoy my little stutter right there. The ship's also about to have a pretty big stutter. But the king did allow many other important people, including his heir, his other illegitimate children, and many nobles to take the vessel home. Around 300 people were on the ship when it left. Others, including the future king Stephen of Blois, left because of how much drinking everyone was doing. More on him in a bit, by the way. In what I'm guessing was an intoxicated move, the passengers prompted Captain Fitz-Stephen to try and overtake the king's ship, which had left hours earlier. The White Ship was fast, and the captain felt confident that they could reach England first in this race. So at the fastest speed they could go, they sailed off into the night and were never seen again. While out in the English Channel, very shortly after they had left the harbor, the ship suddenly struck a submerged rock on its port side and began to take on water. She then very quickly capsized and sank with everyone on board, save one survivor, a butcher named Berold. Berold was very lucky, but he also had to tell the king what happened. Others initially survived when the ship capsized, including King Henry's heir, William. William escaped in a small boat before the White Ship sank, but he turned back to rescue his half-sister after he heard her calling out amid the calamity, but his boat was swamped and he was drowned with everyone else. Captain Thomas Fitz-Stephen surfaced as the ship sank, but after he learned that the king's heir had not survived, he let himself drown rather than face the king. Others who drowned included the ship's reportedly drunk helmsman who was at the wheel the time the collision occurred, the other 50 crew members, many more family members of King Henry I, members of the royal household, nobles of England, nobles of Normandy, 2 clergies, and family of the Emperor of Rome. You know, the ship almost was one that disappeared. Only one person survived, and if they died too, then we probably wouldn't know why this ship never arrived. It would be just another mystery of the many that haunt the ocean and those who travel across it even to this day. Today, and through past centuries, the ship has held on to a bit of a legacy. Historical writers have published works about it, historical fiction authors have as well, and the ship has been subject to several works of poetry. I personally found this story to be very interesting. I'm surprised it's never been made into a movie, honestly. It has a lot of potential drama. This will probably be my favorite of the video, but, we have a few more to cover. It's definitely had the most information to comment on so far, which is nice, and it was overall just a very interesting story. It's cool reading some of these stories from so long ago. But anyway, let's move on to the next ship. Another with a connection to the Titanic. Okay, Spino. The repercussions of the sinking of the White Ship were drastic. The death of King Henry's heir caused a civil war in England known as the Anarchy. The disaster left Henry with one legitimate child, a daughter, but she was not popular with several circles, and she was also a woman. And at this time, no woman had ever ruled England, despite King Henry wishing her the title of his heir. The barons didn't like that. So when Henry died 15 years after the sinking, his barons were reluctant to accept his daughter as heir to the throne. Eventually, a relative of King Henry, Stephen of Blois, usurped Matilda along with his older siblings to become king. Remember that guy, the future king I mentioned? Yeah, it's reported that he was actually among those who was going to be on the white ship, but he left right before it sailed. Stephen's usurpation of the throne was challenged by King Henry's daughter, Matilda, and her husband, Geoffrey, and this started the anarchy, a direct result of William's death in the white ship sinking. An account of the white ship disaster written in the 13th century reads as follows. No ship that ever sailed brought England such disaster. None was so well known the wide world over. There perished then with William the king's other son Richard, born to him before his ascension, by a woman of the country, a high-spirited youth whose devotion had earned his father's love. Today, the wreck is actively being searched for by historians and archaeologists. A candidate for the remains of the white ship have been located, and evidence proving if it is or isn't the white ship is currently being searched for. Alright, something much closer to the modern day. The SS Edward Y. Townsend. This 603-foot-long vessel was a freighter that served on the Great Lakes, and also came to rest somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean, very close to a famous shipwreck. How did that come to be? How did she go from Great Lakes bulk carrier to ship missing at sea? This is the story. She was built in 1906 and would remain in service until 1968. In 1909, she collided with the steam vessel Phillips Minch in Lake Superior, but the damage was only minor. This wasn't the only event of note in her early career. In 1926, she ran aground in shallow water off Buffalo, New York, due to low water levels. She was laid up in Lake Huron for 2 years after suffering severe damage in a storm on the lake in 1966. In 1968, she was finally sold to a Spanish scrapyard, and in September of that year, she began the long voyage across the ocean, being tugged by tugboats. On October 1st, she cleared Quebec and had only the open ocean ahead of her. However, here's where she went missing. A storm struck her and the ships tugging her along when they were 400 miles south of Newfoundland. She broke free in the storm and was never seen again. Where she sank is unknown, but her undiscovered wreck likely lies somewhere very close to the RMS Titanic, as the place that she broke free and was last seen in is very close to where the famous liner sank in 1912. Though, until the Townsend is found, the exact distance between her and the Titanic will remain unknown, it is likely that she rests somewhere not too far away from the Titanic. The storm swallowed up the Townsend, and to this day, she has never been seen again. Sometimes, when a ship disappears, we can kind of explain why, even without many clues, such as bad weather or drifting abandoned at sea and eventually losing its battle with nature. Sometimes there's absolutely nothing to clue us in on what caused her to disappear, as this next case shows. An anchor line vessel built in the early 1850s, this transatlantic passenger liner was 214 feet long and weighed 886 gross registered tons. She was built for sailing before being converted into a screw-propelled steamship in 1856, 2 years after she was launched. Her transatlantic route took her across the ocean from New York to Glasgow. However, her maiden voyage saw her travel from Glasgow to Bombay. Her first Glasgow to New York crossing began on October 11, 1856, and then she safely returned to Glasgow after a 28-day crossing. Her second trip saw her leave Glasgow on December 27th with 50 passengers on board. She safely arrived in New York after this voyage as well. On February 13th, she departed with 150 people on board, along with only one passenger. On this voyage, she disappeared without a trace, and to this day, her fate, and the fates of those on board, as well as the cause for the loss, all remain unknown, and likely will forever. Overall, there's not much information about this story. I found this one really interesting, though, maybe because there was just one passenger on the ship. It makes you wonder what it was like to be the one person on a ship with the crew, and it would be kind of cool to have a whole passenger ship to yourself. It's kind of one of those things you kind of fantasize about. And you also have to wonder how the crew roused them when whatever calamity occurred. Given the time of year, if I had to guess, I'd say the Tempest likely struck an iceberg, but Ultimately, we'll probably never know for sure. But given where she was crossing, and again, the time of year, running afoul with an iceberg seems like a very likely explanation for the loss. Perhaps one day we'll find her wreck and get answers, but this one will likely always remain an unsolved mystery. This next one is also an example of a ship sinking because of unknown causes, but it is also a ship that is significantly more famous than this lost passenger liner. Time for another ancient one. The Xi'an ship was a 14th century sailing vessel built for the Yuan dynasty of China, which lasted from 1271 to 1368. She was 32 meters in length and had a beam of 10 meters, and the original name she had has been completely lost. She was part of a fleet when she was lost near the Xi'an Islands, South Korea. She sank in 1323 and was lost for over 600 years before being found again in 1975. This is the story of the ancient vessel that disappeared. The Xi'an ship rests on a spot designated as a historic site in South Korea. When discovered wrecked off the coast, the theory put forth was that she was part of a trade fleet between ancient China and ancient Japan. What happened to those on board is unknown. It is likely that no one from the 14th century ever knew what happened to this ship. She vanished from their knowledge, and ours, until she was found again in 1975. Its excavation was the first underwater excavation of its kind in South Korea, and the wreck housed many hundreds of treasures and artifacts, weighing a total of 200 tons. The process of unearthing this ship was difficult due to how murky the water was, but the wreck itself has been titled the richest ancient shipwreck yet discovered. Though we know from an earlier video in this series that an even more wealthy one is out there somewhere. If you know which one I mean, you've been paying attention. The underwater excavation of this shipwreck led to many advancements of underwater archaeology in Korea itself. There is a lot of really fascinating information about this ship that exists, and I highly encourage you all to read some of it. But in interest of not straying too far off topic, I'm not going to cover some of the excavation information and how she is where she is now, along with the cargo. I'll end this section with this, though. Why this ship sank while traveling is unknown. Perhaps she ran into foul weather or became wrecked in shallow water. Either way, she vanished for centuries before she was finally found again and remembered once more. But it makes you wonder, how many ancient shipwrecks should be on our list of missing ships? With these bonus stories, I tend to cheat and only cover something that is technically on topic. And this is one of those. In this case, we know what happened to this vessel. She didn't vanish like the others, but did in a different way. The remains of this vessel have not been found, and the story is fascinating, so I thought I'd cover it as this video's bonus topic. Yes, thank you, Spino. That's what I just said. The Turtle was the world's first submersible vessel that saw use in combat. While one might think of the American Civil War as an example of early submarines used in combat, this one predates those by around 90 years. The Turtle was built in 1775, and her purpose was to attach explosive charges to the bottoms of British vessels during the American Revolutionary War. I just gotta say it, that is awesome, and the fact that they thought to do something like this way back then is just cool. This is the story of the Turtle and how she became lost. The Turtle was a tiny little thing, 9 feet long and with a beam of 3 feet rounded up. We don't know much about the inspiration for the sub, but we know how effective it was. She was built by David Bushnell, and as the first submarine to serve in combat, her role was to attach explosives to the undersides of British ships anchored in New York Harbor. Every attempt failed, so big F on that science project. Fair, I'll even give him a D+ for the ingenuity. The Turtle had a long development period and preparation period before seeing any use. Her target was a ship called the HMS Eagle, a flagship vessel of the blockade squadron in New York. She was a symbol of power. And the colonists of America knew that if they could destroy her with a submarine, the British morale would take a huge blow, and British control of New York Harbor would be threatened. So, when she was ready, she was towed to New York, and her operator, Ezra Lee, prepared to attack the Eagle. The plan failed. Lee only had 20 minutes of air, and the conditions of the harbor, the darkness, and difficulty maneuvering the vessel combined to keep him from completing the task. While ingenious in concept, the Turtle was a failure of a craft. Her story could make an entire video. And if you're curious and interested, let me know and consider this a teaser for it. Now, on to the fate of the Turtle. As with these bonus stories, again, I tend to cheat and include a story that only technically fits within the concept of the video, like the Extreme Clipper Hurricane in the last one, and the Turtle is no different. She simply vanishes from history, and what her fate was is unknown. But it is thought that she was intentionally destroyed to keep the British from getting their hands on her. And that wraps up Ships That Disappeared at Sea, Volume 5. We covered over 10 stories in this video, each one unique and captivating. With some of these, the losses are easy to explain, like how the sea serpent finally succumbed to no maintenance, and the harsh conditions of the ocean following her abandonment, or the white ship, which struck a rock and flooded. And others are more mysterious, like what happened to the SS Tempest? Did she strike an iceberg? Did she get swamped by a rogue wave? It's stories like that that really captivate me and make me want to continue this series in particular. The mysteries pull you in and make you wonder. If she struck a berg, you wonder what played out on board as she went down. Unfortunately, these answers are secrets lost to history, and history is never going to give them up. But they really make you wonder. You could write incredible historical fiction works based on some of these and bring their stories to the mainstream light. And I think they deserve that, to ensure that they're remembered. One reason I've really enjoyed writing and sharing my original stories based on World War II urban legends is that I get to throw in some real historical events that people don't really know about. Maybe one day I'll do the same thing for some of these lost ships, and I'll continue to bring their stories to you and help ensure that they are remembered. So, until Volume 6, I'm going to sign off on this video. And I hope to see you in the next video. We're finally going to get back to a prehistory topic because while we're not going to be talking about the Hadean Xi'an, I still haven't decided if I'm actually going to finish that video. We are going to be talking about a dinosaur that went from a giant turtle, rather fitting considering the last topic, to a giant claw-wielding herbivore, the Therizinosaurus. I haven't done a prehistory video since the boring billion one, and I'm very excited to finally get back to it and do another one. We've done lots of maritime videos lately, and I think it'll be a fun change of pace. Last thing I want is for people to think the topics get stale from a lack of variety. I want each video to be fresh and exciting for you because that's what matters. So until then, have a good one, check my other documentaries out, and be sure to watch the other Missing Ships ones because you're going to have a pop quiz coming up after Volume 6. So I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Also, tell me which of these ships you found the most interesting. I'd love to know. For me, it was definitely the white ship. Also, if you've seen every episode of this series, tell me which ship has been your favorite so far. I will say, though probably not my overall favorite, off the top of my head, the Lord Spencer from Volume 4 is up there for me because of the intriguing and unsettling nature of the story. And it really makes you wonder what played out on board her as she rapidly sank on that night in the South Atlantic Ocean. In particular, I really wonder what was going on in her wheelhouse right before the collision. I think if I could see what exactly happened on any of these ships, it would be her. But tell me your picks and any suggestions you'd like to see in the next one. I can't wait for the mysteries we'll find in Volume 6.